On to news from the US now. As the US heads to the polls in November this year, the first ever mostly digital National Democratic Convention kicked off today in Milwaukee. The four-day virtual affair includes delegates and speakers scattered across the country. United States has held presidential nominating conventions for almost 200 years. However, this year it will be a political event unlike any ever seen by Americans. The coronavirus pandemic had earlier forced the Democratic Party to postpone the convention by a month. The outbreak has also forced the convention to go largely online. The DNC will formally nominate former Vice President Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential candidate and Indian origin Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo were the main headliners for the first night that is being moderated by actress Eva Longoria. The focus today remained on the pandemic and economic crisis in the United States and rising racism in the country. The first day also featured a roundtable hosted by Biden along with racial justice activists. Listen in to what the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee had to say.
A stake in their own future.
You know, I've said from the outset of this election that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are in the battle for the soul of this nation. What we believe, and maybe most importantly, who we want to be, it's all at stake. That's truer today than it's ever been, at least in my lifetime. And it's this urgency, it's in this urgency, we can find a path forward.
Michelle Obama was also seen repeating her memorable "When they go low, we go high" line from the 2016 DNC speech.
As George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and a never-ending list of innocent people of color continue to be murdered, stating the simple fact that a Black life matters is still met with derision from the nation's highest office. Because whenever we look to this White House for some leadership or consolation or any semblance of steadiness, what we get instead is chaos, division, and a total and utter lack of empathy.
Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders asked everyone to unite to remove Trump, referring to him as the most dangerous president in the U.S. history.
We're facing the worst public health crisis in 100 years and the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. We are confronting systemic racism and the enormous threat to our planet of climate change. And in the midst of all of this, we have a president who is not only incapable of addressing these crises, but is leading us down the path of authoritarianism. This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo also backed Biden's bid for the White House, slamming Donald Trump and the federal response to the pandemic, which once ravaged his state. George Floyd's brother held a moment of silence in honor of his brother and the many other souls that have been lost to hate and injustice. Floyd's death sparked the Black Lives Matter protests across the world, exposing a deep racial crisis in the United States.
Our next speaker stood up, stood strong, and turned that place into...
George had a giving spirit, a spirit that has shown up on streets around our nation and around the world. People of all races, all ages, all genders, all backgrounds, peacefully protesting in the name of love and unity. It's a fitting legacy for our brother, but George should be alive today.
The convention will end with Biden accepting his formal nomination on August 20th, becoming the Democratic presidential candidate to face Donald Trump in the November presidential elections. For more on this, Jagriti Dave has sent us a ground report from Washington, D.C. Listen in.
Well, the first day of the convention has kicked off, and how it started, really it's very different from what you normally would see. What throughout this convention you would normally see packed arenas. You will get balloon drops and confetti at the end of the candidate's speech. You have people in interesting hats and interesting dresses, real characters on the scene. You're not getting any of that. The convention actually started with Eva Longoria, the actress, moderating, emceeing the event, and it really just looked like a sort of a television presentation. And you heard from ordinary Americans from across the country on the issues that affected them. So you heard from a small business owner, you heard from a farmer, you heard from a teenager who's an activist. You heard about the issues that affect them and why they are choosing to back Joe Biden. It's very different from the ordinary format of a convention. And of course, as you say, this is all virtual. It's a one of a kind. Normally this would have been held in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, but instead Joe Biden is going to be delivering his speech from his home state of Delaware. Michelle Obama, you played an excerpt from her speech. We're going to hear from her later on. But, you've got some big names. And interestingly today, what you're going to see is names like Bernie Sanders, who comes from the left wing, the progressive wing of the party. But you're also going to hear from several former Republicans who are also backing Joe Biden, which is the Biden campaign and the Democrats' attempt to show that Joe Biden is leading a broad coalition of voices.